10 minutes to sum up. They gave him half an hour. I'm ripped off.
25 minutes. Half an hour of your lives you'll never get back. Thanks, Ian. Can I say, I don't just rely on myself. I do have a pretty good advisor in Peter Volker, who's been twice president of the Institute of Forestry, to keep me on the straight and narrow around this stuff. But it is something that I am really interested in, and obviously it's something that's important for us here in Tasmania. It was really interesting that this week I sat down with some advisors out of the department with Peter just to talk about forestry implementation policy, and at the end of that conversation we started talking about how we might get some trees back into the landscape and what the benefits might be. I still had a few questions in my mind about some of the implications of that, how it might work and how it might fit. And it's wonderful how circumstances sometimes bring themselves together to provide you with some of those answers, and that's what today's actually done for me. Unfortunately I missed this morning, but this afternoon the discussion around the science of putting windbreaks back into the landscape, how that works, the practical thought processes from you guys, just listening to what you've been saying and the questions you've been asking, is really valuable for someone like me, because you can actually try and build that into your picture. And one of the things I'd urge you to do when you're looking at how you might set something like this up in the future is to look out, to look ahead, to see what's coming towards you. And I was actually thinking about that when you were asking the questions and talking about it today, because one of the things that we were talking about in our conversation with the department earlier in the week is how we get some carbon back into the landscape. And my view for quite a long time is that this is a really effective way to do that. But how you manage the cycles, how you maintain the carbon store, and how you achieve the objectives that you might want as practitioners on farm were some of the questions that I still had in my mind. And just listening to you today and the presentations actually helped answer some of those questions. Things like the orientation to the sun and to the wind direction, how that might fit into the broader landscape. And in my view, there is huge opportunity for us to get multiple benefits out of putting trees back into the landscape, for carbon storage, for shelter, for timber production, and for benefits and growth in productivity on the land. And to actually have some of that thought process that has been developing in my mind confirmed so much more today has been really valuable for me. So congratulations to Private Forest Tasmania and all the other participants in putting it together, for doing something like this. And talking to other farmers, particularly here in Tassie, people like Ian Dickinson, who have had part of their process a broader farm management planning process where they look at all the aspects of their farm, how they all fit together, how they integrate, and how it generates returns for farmers. The benefit of that, the quality of that, the value of that is actually been reaffirmed for me here again today. So in the general policy development process, I'm go back and pester my guys in the department even more next week when we go back up, because discussion that I had with ABS, for example, talked about the capacity to reforest something in the order of 20% of the landscape on mainland Australia, where there's been so much that's been taken out, but can provide all these benefits that we've been discussing here today back into the rural sector. You talk about replanting streamside reserves, which puts the carbon back in, can put some native vegetation back in, can stabilise riverbanks, can even generate its own little microclimates and improve moisture values in certain areas. So there's a whole heap of things that I think that can come out of this. And so the value of putting a program like this together today is obviously of use to you. We often say that we learn as farmers by looking over the fence to see what the next door neighbour is doing, and if it works for them, it might work for me. So that's been the value of things like land care and NRM and all of those things that we've participated in over a long period of time. But to actually gather together and start discussing, listen to each other's questions and the answers as they all come forward, I think have been really valuable. So I'm not going to take half an hour, but I have learned a lot out today. The other thing is I've got some chocolate to take away with me from the ice creams that Ian brought to keep us quiet while the presentations we've been heard earlier. But I'm happy to answer any questions that you like about things that we're doing, what we're proposing going forward. Congratulations to those that put the program on today. I think it's been really, really good. It's good to get out of the office, get out in the fresh air too, from my perspective after the week on camera. But I'd like to be able to take something out of here today and then put it into our policy development work. So it's perhaps another element of encouragement for you guys when you're thinking about the economics of what you're doing, as well as all the other elements that you're trying to pull together of putting trees back onto the farm and back into the landscape and the opportunities that might provide. Because one of the things that we really want to do in respect of agriculture is improve its profitability, which is, let's face it, what you're all about in running your business every day. So thanks for the opportunity to be here. I appreciate it. Happy to take any questions in.
Thank you, Richard. Fire away, people. Question. No great statement, just the question. Bang, go.
What are the possibilities, prospects of further establishment grants, either at a state or federal level, to actually establish something like this? And what are the chances of the tax regime changing so that our superannuation deduction contributions will increase back to the levels where they were before the Liberal Party left government, lost government? Because nobody today, no one has discussed the tax implications of growing this stuff. If you're getting $10 a tonne, you're losing another 5 to the government.
Well, if you're making a profit, you're paying tax. That's true.
So the
I'd like to
economics don't stack up.
I'd like to see people making a profit. That way we can collect tax and provide other services. Look, if you've got anything specific around that, Ian, let us know, because we can poke it into the tax review that we're doing. So, obviously,
well, I mean, as you know, I came in initially under the original Euclid grant status here in Tasmania. We had fine loan structures. There was a lot more support from the state for the individual growers to actually get in and grow. That evaporated.
Can I say my perception about grants and those sorts of things into these sorts of programs, given the state of various budgets, national and state, I'd say it's pretty slim. But there are other things that are occurring. So I talked about carbon, and I think that's real. That's a real opportunity. You've also got, depending on what you're growing, the potential returns. One of the things that I have got some interest in, and I don't know if there's been any work done on it, but I'll certainly be following it up, is what's possible with respect to some high value species. So, I mean, that's some of the questions that you need to be asking yourselves when you're making your decisions around this. So we've seen two examples here this afternoon of two different species with very different economics, and also very different returns at the end of the day. One that's basically going to be a fibre or cellulose provider, and one that's got the opportunity to provide some soil log with some thinning and some management. And the management's an important part of the whole deal. It's no different from the rest of your farm. One thing that sort of interested me a little bit has been some of the questions that sort of seem to isolate the trees from the rest of the farm and the benefits of it. The discussion that we had earlier is you really need to tie all this sort of stuff together and look at what the whole is rather than just bits of it. Unless, of course, you're looking at a large they're wanting to get away from petrochemicals. I've seen in the last week a product that's come out of Canada that's being used for bags for blood and things like that in the medical sector, made out of nanocrystalline cellulose. I mean, high value cellulose-based chemicals. There's a whole lot of stuff that's coming down the line at the moment that I don't think that a lot of people really understand, and all these resources that are sitting in our farms and around regional Australia are going to be enormously beneficial. The airlines are targeting the Green Triangle in Victoria and South Australia at the moment to where they might look for that aviation fuel. So there's a whole lot coming down the pike at the moment, real opportunity I think. And that's why I'm pretty bullish about forestry. It's not just because I'm a supporter of it. I mean, I'm like Mark, I started off when I was 15 or 16 wood turning. That was what got my association with timber. And then the trade. So yes, I had that bias, but there are enormous opportunities. I was putting together the new Forest Wood Products Council this week, trying to get all of the elements in. The one that I'm really struggling with at the moment is where we're heading in the future. It's really difficult. Yeah, we need to, I mean, it's stable policy. We really want a period of stable policy and not being filtered on an election cycle over what might or might not be available.
Yeah. You mentioned carbon quite a lot.
Yep.
And well, if carbon's $23 a tonne and you're growing, what was it, 28 cubes a hectare a year here, that's $322 for carbon offsets per hectare per year. But under the reverse auction, the proposed emissions reduction fund, what do you think the carbon price is going to do? How's it going to move? What might be the bottom limit to it?
Look, I don't know yet, and that's the market's going to determine that. But with trees, you have probably the best understood opportunity for storing carbon. Now, we talk about carbon emission reduction. There doesn't seem to be a lot of discussion about carbon storage. We have in trees one of the best and best understood opportunities to do that. And that was the conversation I was having with my department, so that whatever programs that we're putting together, we can take account of that sort of stuff. And we know that you get to a stage where the timber matures and you've got a static carbon store, but it doesn't really matter where they are. I mean, if you've got a 100,000 hectares of eucalypt that's average 15 years old, it'll store over its area a certain amount of carbon. But if you're taking a bit out the top end and putting more in it, and you've got an average age across it, you still have your carbon store. And there is capacity by harvesting this, regenerating, to store more carbon. So a managed forest will store more carbon than a static one. So you continue to put carbon into the system. So then the thought processes that are going in my mind, it's a matter of getting him in through the policy process. And you know, I think there are opportunities in addition to all the other stuff that's going on. So you can get the carbon benefits, you can get the timber benefit, the other product benefit, the performance on your farm benefit, and you need to measure all of those things together, as we were discussing earlier, add it all up to see what the bigger picture is. Question over there.
Richard, the government position, not your government, but was to have a 2020 vision of tripling the plantation estate in the country. Have you guys settled on a vision as to where you see that sort of the big picture?